Welcome to the Derek Loudermilk Show. This is episode 397 with Monica Laurence. Monica Laurence is a Silicon Valley tech executive who's worked with more than 50 companies, including Lucasfilm. She's the owner of a boutique resort in the Fiji Islands named Tavola Fiji, and she teaches a course called Quantum Surfing that teaches people how to be repeatably lucky. So you're going to learn about this metaphor, what is quantum surfing, and that is how to go with the flow of energy to make your life easier, to be more lucky, rather than paddling against the current, which is effective but costs lots of energy. So you're going to learn behaviors, thought processes, habits that allow someone to be repeatably lucky. And Monica is a new friend of mine who, like myself, focuses on the intersection of validated scientific methods and spirituality and the woo, a bit of the woo with a bit of the science. So if you want practical methods to experience more miracles in your life, keep listening. Here's Monica Laurence. Monica, great to see you again.
Derek, fantastic to be with you. Always a pleasure.
Let's actually start with something I haven't talked to you about yet, which is your villa. You've got a villa in Fiji. How did you come to buy the villa? I think I heard somewhere that you had like a previous family member that had a villa or a resort in Fiji. Is that true?
Yes, I grew up in and out of Fiji. So I've been here in Savu at Tavola Villa for 4 years, but I first came to Fiji 40 years ago. I really had the most wonderful fortune in life to be the niece of my Uncle Dick. And he's truly a maverick. After he graduated from business school in the 60s, he started a company that was like a roll-up of different cable stations. And then he sold that business and he took a trip around the world really looking for meaning in life. And Fiji was his last stop. And he kept extending and extending and extending. There's a beautiful energy here in Fiji, and the people are stunning. And of course, the natural beauty is absolutely breathtaking. And so he was just wrapping up. He couldn't extend any longer. And he was the last night sitting in the bar. And he would tell you, if he were telling you this story, that, he spent a lot of evenings in the bar. But usually it wasn't a place that wonderful things happened for him. But on this evening, he sat next to this guy. And this gentleman turns to my uncle and he says, hey, I have an island for sale. Would you be interested in it? And so,
What?
I know. So like, sure. So anyway, the next day they get in a small plane and they fly out and they circle this island a few times and they get back to the airport. And my uncle said, it's great, I'll take it. So he left as he planned, and a couple months later, he came back to Fiji and he started his life here. And he passed about 2 years ago now. But he's an incredible influence on my life, and to see how he shaped his life here and how he shared life with the people who live here is inspiring, is remarkable. You might know his island. It's called Turtle Island, and it was completely remote. There were no resorts in his area of Fiji. And then the movie The Blue Lagoon was being filmed, and they were looking for a place to shoot. And so they came and scouted locations at Turtle Island, and that's where that movie was filmed with Christopher Atkins and Brooke Shields. It was one of those 80s films that everyone knew of it. So that's really what started his resort business, and now it's one of the really top 5-star private island resorts in the world. So if it hadn't been for him, I wouldn't have made the jump myself to running a business in Fiji. But I felt quite confident that I could do it, and I've been a serial entrepreneur in the US, and so I thought, well, so how can it can't be that difficult, right? Let's just make it happen. And I laugh at myself because it was really quite challenging. But of course, like anything else that's challenging, once you're through it, then you look back with the fondness of the memories, and especially watching yourself navigate all the chaos. So yeah, now Tavola Villa is a beautiful, stunning resort. We host guests here, and it's always a private villa buyout. So we're happy to share it with lots of special people.
Yeah. Turtle Island, did you know that's what the Native Americans called their land, like North America, right?
Yes. Yes.
Did he get it from one of those traditions?
I don't believe so, but I also feel that it may be not, there's not so coincidences, right? Like there is meaning in these connections and these threads. But the actual name of the island in Fijian is Nunuialevu, and it doesn't mean Turtle Island. But my uncle felt that he needed a name that was easy for Americans to pronounce and remember.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much beauty and longevity and mysticism really about the turtle. And so he decided to call it Turtle Island. But years ago, a friend sent me a book of poems about Turtle Island, of kind of in the native tradition there in the northern hemisphere. And yeah, lots of similar threads in terms of ideas and stewardship of the land, and kind of sacred beauty of the land, and the reverence for connection with people and land. And my uncle really took care of that island. When he first purchased it, it had been completely barren. There had been goats grazing on it, and the whole place was just a bunch of brown grass. And
no tropical jungle.
Eventually, yeah, he planted many trees, and kind of brought it back to life. So he's really a pioneer in what has become popular now, which is this sustainable tourism, and also offering people authentic experiences, to live in connection with the land, and to experience culture here in the Fiji Islands that is unlike our day-to-day there in the US. So as you can tell, I loved him dearly, and he's inspiring in so many ways.
Yeah, that's was that your mom's brother?
Yes.
Okay. And quick question about the Fijian culture. Is it Polynesian like other Pacific Islanders, or what is it similar to?
Yeah, I guess it would be like in the kind of the greater Polynesian, Melanesian culture. And here in Fiji, you have the Fijian Islanders, and then you have the Indian population who came to Fiji when the Brits were using the land in Fiji to farm cane. And
Mm.
so you ended up in Fiji with this kind of melting pot of of cultures, which also makes it really special. It's a place where people really live in harmony. And that's not to say that there aren't differences. Of course there are. Um, but there's such an acceptance for all peoples and all beliefs and all traditions, while still preserving the essence of each one of those traditions. There's a book, by the way, that I use in my third course in quantum surfing, called The Wayfinders by Wade Davis. Are you familiar with it?
No.
All right.
Wayfinders.
So it's a wonderful book, and there's a few really powerful insights and takeaways. One is the importance of language. That language doesn't just allow us to communicate with one another. Language actually carries the beliefs and the mental constructs of the culture. A small example of this would be when we speak English, there is a emphasis on future tense. And as my uncle once commented to me, this is in large part because if you live in a place that has cold winters, you need to plan for the fact that it's going to be cold and you need to prepare for that. So there's this emphasis on preparation and planning and making sure that you're going to be safe and be able to survive that future.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here in Fiji, the local language does not have that same sort of emphasis on the future. And if you think about it from the same perspective, why would it? If you're hungry, you climb a coconut tree, or you pull a papaya off the tree, or you drop a line into the sea and you pull out a fish. And it's that way all year round. So there's not a need to be so future focused. Which, how that translates today is that the people who live here are much more in the moment. They're very present. And there's not that kind of noise that we have always about projecting forward and thinking so much. So Wade Davis comments on this in his book, The Wayfinders, and he really brings to our attention how tragic it is that the English language is taking over the world. And that we're losing different ways of thinking when these, traditional or smaller languages disappear, because we're losing the cultural understanding, we're losing the cultural perspective associated with those languages. And I find it really interesting because we don't think about the fact that we're exporting our culture when we spread our language.
Mm-hmm.
But that's effectively what's happening. So that's one very powerful insight from his book, and I want to share another. Let me just pause there before going on to the second one.
Well, I was just gonna say that I read Braiding Sweetgrass last year. I don't know if you've encountered that, but it's where I learned about Turtle
Yes.
Island. And
Oh,
the other thing that's relevant here is in many Native American languages, the labels of personhood extend to everything. So like animals are people too, and trees and rocks are people. And so it's a language lens that says like we're all people, that, we're all equals. Rather than in English, it's like there's a thing, I'm going to take it because it's an object, and I'm like doing the verb on the object. And from a scientific perspective, it totally changes the way you study or observe nature when it's like you're studying a peer. Like it's in relationship rather than observer and observed, which it just everything clicked when I started thinking that way.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's an additional insight, which is again so powerful. And these are assumptions that are just part and parcel of our everyday. When we talk about limiting beliefs, which is an area that has become so popular, we don't think about these things. We don't think about the fact that we walk through life treating animals and trees and rocks as objects, without any sort of consciousness. And so the fact that you're bringing that to attention is really interesting, and it makes me think I should bump Braiding Sweetgrass higher on my list.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. I think it was the best book I read last year. I usually kind of review all the books I read at the end of the year. And I can't remember if I ranked it at number 1 or number 2, but it's definitely up there.
Hmm. Hmm.
But what was the second point?
The other, yes, right. Okay, so he talks about the culture and the capabilities here in the islands, which when you asked, okay, is it Polynesian there in Fiji, it made me remember his stories. So from Hawaii all the way down to Fiji and beyond in the Pacific Ocean, that's like a third of the surface area. It's like enormous, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Polynesians were expert sailors and navigators, but they had no technology to navigate. So they didn't have the sextant, for example, which is how Europeans were able to start navigating the seas. And so what Wade talks about is how they were navigating. And Derek, is fascinating, absolutely fascinating, because they were using what I would call intuition. And they were developing that sense of intuition to such a deep level that they were in communication with the elements of the sea, with the wind. They could simply feel which way to go. And then they would break down the navigation into manageable chunks. So, if you were using, Google Maps today or something like that, you'd say, okay, I'm starting here and I'm putting in my destination and it just gives me from here to there. But that's not how the Polynesians were navigating. They'd say, well, to get from here to there, I go to A to B to C, to like all these little islands along the way. Each of these islands have their own bit of footprint, if you will. The way that the waves and the winds play off each island give it a different footprint, a different signature than a nearby island, which is shaped differently, different reefs. And so the way that the wind and the waves behave around that island is different. So when you come to know these signatures, you know where you are. And the
so it's like radar.
The role, yeah,
kind of.
yeah. The role of the navigator is just to sit in the boat, in the center of the boat, and be able to feel all of the currents across the boat. So you could feel up to like I have to check the numbers, but let's say 3 large deep currents that cross the entire ocean, and up to 4 more chaotic currents that are more localized. And people who were navigators were trained by almost like spending a lot of time in the sea, coming to understand this. The point being is that, sometimes when it comes to intuition, because we live in a highly technical society and we don't have to rely on ourselves and our senses, we start to doubt whether or not they even exist. But when you go back and appreciate what these people were doing, how they had honed their senses in such a practical and applied way to be able to navigate from one island to another simply by intuition, simply by these feelings and sensations and recognizing patterns. You say, oh, wow, we have this capability. It's just that in our technological society, we don't use it. So it atrophies, just like if you weren't using a muscle. So yeah, those are two big takeaways from Wade Davis, which you just reminded me when you asked about the culture here and, you know, Polynesian.
Yeah, fascinating. And I'm imagining, like, in a pinch, you could just ask the dolphins, you know, like, oh, I'm not really reading this very well. Like, can you help me out? They're like, go that way.
Well, what Wade would tell you is that in order to, you have to like keep a mental track of where you've been in order to know where you are. Okay, which is also, it's an idea, like I think even Steve Jobs had talked about that in a commencement address, right? He's like, you don't understand where you are. You don't understand all points before until you're looking back more where I am. And the way they would correct for that is they would simply visualize where they were going.
Yeah. Sorry, I just lost about 20 seconds. Your last 20 seconds. I don't know if you could rewind and start over.
Sure. When the navigators would lose track of the sequence that brought them to where they were, the way they would correct for that is they would envision where they were going. So they didn't think of themselves as going to that island that was their target. They thought of themselves as the island coming to them and like raising into their point of view. And when they took that perspective, they were able to get back on track and navigate accordingly. It's a subtle shift, but extraordinarily powerful. And so these are just some great takeaways from Wade by looking at the history of multiculturalism and the Polynesians in particular.
Yeah. It reminds me of, I was watching a course by this another Native American. I'm trying to remember his name. But anyway, he was saying that when he had a long drive to do, he would essentially spend the whole time visualizing his arrival, and that he would skip most of the drive. He would sort of like warp to the destination. So a 12-hour drive would become like a 3-hour drive. And like you wouldn't notice a time when you had like leapt forward, but all of a sudden you're arriving, driving into the town where you're supposed to be going. And so I haven't been able to do it like super repeatably, but there is those moments where it's like you think like, oh, did we just skip ahead like a few hundred miles? It's like really hard to tell, but focusing on like the destination, like rising, and your experience of being at the destination seems to be the key.
Well, you just might have decoded for me why my experience is the opposite on road trips. Like with my friends, we joke that, okay, of course, Monica and her passengers fell into the vortex because we're having so much fun on the way there that we're totally losing track of time. And then the people at the destination waiting for us are like, what happened to them? Where are they? When are they arriving? And we finally pull on up thinking we're right on time. And they're like, where have you been? Like, what do you mean? We just drove here like anybody else.
Interesting. So you're so in the present that it's like expanding time for you.
Evidently.
Yeah, I mean, you could go either way, I guess.
Mhm.
So, all right, let's get into quantum surfing since we're sort of touching on some of these things. And you mentioned the third course, but what's a brief overview of this modality you've created or discovered?
Yeah. Quantum surfing is really a new method for success, and it combines quantum mechanics, neuroscience, and what I call applied enlightenment, which are spiritual practices grounded in science, so they're repeatable. I've had the great fortune of going through terrific educational programs and working at some of the best and most exciting places in the world. Um, and through that journey, I've been trained in a method for success, a repeatable method of setting goals and planning and applying resources and making assumptions about limitations in order to navigate to that desired end goal. But in my own journey, especially on the spiritual side, I started seeing that there could be shortcuts, that there could be hacks to that method. And so I started experimenting with those shortcuts and hacks. And once I established that, oh, this is actually a thing, then I started wondering why. And that's what really took me down the path of neuroscience and quantum mechanics. So what I'm sharing with people in quantum surfing is essentially how to use their energy to navigate to the vision that they have, which would be considered the goal in the usual methodology, so that you're able to get to your destination still preserving your own energy rather than burning yourself out, and really bringing your light and impact to the world. So it's been a lifelong practice for me that I just started sharing publicly during lockdown in the pandemic, because I had enough time then to pull the principles together in a coherent way.
I'm curious, what was the first thing you were playing around with, the first hack or the first thing where you were surprised by how easy it was, or something that your first experiment?
Sometimes I get small ideas and then I practice them in larger ways. I kind of push them to their limit. So like one such insight was from A Course in Miracles, which I've actually never taken myself, but my hairstylist at the time was taking that course. And so, because I'm quite curious, I was asking her a lot of questions about it. And what I heard her say, Derek, and in retrospect, I'm not even sure that it's taught in A Course in Miracles, but what I heard her say, what stuck with me, was the phrase, a miracle is a shift in perspective. And I was like, that's really interesting. We think of miracles as magnificent things that are completely unexpected that we observe. They're like these bolts of lightning. And we might even think that miracles used to happen more often, because if we're raised in traditions, biblical traditions, then lots of miracles are happening then. But we don't really have the idea that miracles are happening on a day-to-day basis here. So when I heard this, miracles are a shift in perspective, it's like, well, that's interesting. So I just started challenging myself. Whenever I would be in a situation, I would say, can I take a different perspective? What's the miracle here? I would almost call it like miracle sleuthing, right? All right, let's just assume that there's a miracle happening and that I'm not seeing it because I don't have the right perspective. So I would just keep trying on different perspectives to see if I might find a miracle. That path actually unlocked for me new perspectives, new opportunities. It unlocked a sense of trust that while I may not understand why everything is unfolding the way it is, that there's a rhyme and reason to how it's unfolding, and that I can start to challenge myself to see the storyline behind how it's unfolding. So I experimented with this early on. And then over time, I started combining it with the hero's journey, which is pioneered by Joseph Campbell. And if we imagine that we're all on a hero's journey, that this life that you're living is the journey of a hero. You're the hero. Well, the hero only becomes the hero because of the challenges. It wouldn't be a hero's journey without the challenges. And what you know by the end of any heroic story is how all of those challenges, those troubling moments, the times when the protagonist had to really dig deep to find something more within themselves, that's why he became the hero. Right? It's like being in the fire to actually become stronger. So I started thinking, I think this miracle perspective is that. Like, if you trust that the overall arc of the story is one of a hero, then rather than get bogged down in the moments when you, the hero, are struggling, you say, I know I'm on a hero's journey. So let me just decipher this plot twist here. How is this plot twist that doesn't align with my expectations of how everything was going to work? How is this plot twist instead possibly a shortcut to what I would most deeply desire? How is this plot twist giving me tools, new insights in myself, more resilience, more connections that will serve me on the journey that I've laid out for myself? So it's like, really, this is what I've done over decades, is taken a tiny idea and then just started living it in larger ways. And then I start to see the connections with other ideas, and I put those together. It's given me a whole fabric, a different understanding of how reality works, simply by parsing together experiments over time.
Yeah, this is fantastic. So assuming there's a miracle happening at all times, I mean, that's amazing right by itself. Could you give an example of a time when you were struggling and maybe just how you applied this in one of those moments of struggle?
Yeah. I'll just speak right now. It's interesting because we are having human experience. And even when we understand these concepts, it doesn't mean that we don't have challenges or we don't struggle. We do. So for me, there's the one side that knows that this is the framework. And then there's the other side of me that goes, and, what's happening here? When I came to Fiji, I didn't think it was going to be that challenging. I knew how to run a resort from my uncle. I had purchased a smaller property that already had a staff, and I felt that I was buying a turnkey operation. In fact, I had all of my business in Silicon Valley, and I had just committed to a new board seat and a new startup that I had added into my portfolio. So I thought when I came to Fiji that it was going to be about 4 months to get everything, kind of resituated. When I got here, it wasn't that. I didn't realize that the property needed a lot more work. If you walked on the decks, you would fall through them.
Oh gosh.
When you turned on the water, no water would come out. Yeah. And so these are like fundamental and important aspects of a guest experience. So it's like, this is crazy. I can't get up and go. I'm going to have to fix all of this. And so I rearranged my life in Silicon Valley, and I spent more time here in Fiji. Now, what I quickly saw among expats here in Fiji is a sense of dissatisfaction, not expats who have retired here, but expats who are trying to run businesses in a model that's different from the business model we use in the States. And so they often found Fijian processes to be aggravating, to be slow. And there was just too much overhead, too much bureaucracy. And you couldn't even make appointments. You just had to go into these agencies and sit down and wait your turn. And there certainly was no such thing as online. Mm-hmm. So I was watching these other expats doing business here and saying, well, no wonder most people only last for a couple of years, because it can be so aggravating to be in this slow, arduous business environment. I said, but I don't want that to be me. First of all, I don't want that to be my day-to-day. And I plan to do business here for a long time. So I certainly don't want my life to be about, being angry and upset. So I said, we're going to take a completely different perspective here. So every time I went into one of those agencies, I would say, whew, I'm so happy to be in an air-conditioned office. I can't wait to just wait my turn and sit here for as long as possible while I cool down from all the other errands that I had in town. And then when I would have my turn with like the tax agent, like, when's the last time you ever went? Have you ever gone into a tax office?
Friendly tax man,
in the US? Do you know anyone who? Right? Exactly. Like, do you know anyone who works in the tax office? Like, that's like just not an experience we have. So then I would get to the front and I would take the opportunity to spend my time chatting with the person who was helping me, learning about her family, learning about her children. Just
so you're the
making
one
conversation
who is,
and then
you're the one who is slowing down things for everybody else. Is that what you're saying?
Not unlike my vortex story for road trips. Because I had to go back into these agencies, 4 or 5 times. They would always send me away with more paperwork. They needed something else. So the right person wasn't there to stamp my documents. Come back later, over and over and over and over and over. But something happened because I was taking this approach. I was looking forward to the time in those offices. I was appreciating that I had some quiet moments in my day while I waited in a comfortable environment. But what was also happening, which I never would have imagined, is that the people there got to know me and they started helping me. When new regulations would come up, they would contact me proactively. When I would forget that I had a deadline to renew the registration on the boat, then I would be getting a phone call. Did you know that you need to renew your registration? If you'd like, I'm happy to fill out the paperwork and you can just come on down and, it will be waiting here for you. So the people became so helpful. When I would walk into an agency, one of the agents would look up and just start waving, and as I was having these lovely social moments, like the little exchanges that really feed your soul, you know? And this all came home for me when I was in that tax office one day after traveling this journey myself. And there was an expat couple in there, and they were so aggravated, and they were raising a ruckus in our little backwater here of Savu Savu. And they were demanding that this agent get the head office on the phone, and that this was an outrage and this needed to be fixed right now. And, just demeaning everyone in that office and forcing their way through to get what they wanted, which, of course, now that I'm telling you the story, you would know, of course, they didn't get what they wanted. But what struck me is that I know I didn't have that experience. I wasn't even in the same reality, because I had shifted how I interacted in that reality. I had taken a different perspective. I had said, I'm not going to change how the Fijian system works, but I know I want to live here for a long time and be successful in my business. So how am I going to challenge myself to find the beauty, to find moments in their system that I can appreciate and thrive in?
You're making me like a little anxious just hearing that story. I'm so sure that I would be like the couple. But at the same time, one of the things that I love, and almost everyone that I talk to does, is when you run into people, your friends all over town, and it's like the best thing ever. So, like we spend a lot of effort trying to engineer a community or like gathering the right people to the right place, and but if you're just part of your day, it reminds me of my grandfather. He like goes to the post office daily because he's like, oh, my friend's at the post office, I'm just gonna drop a letter off just to go visit with them, right? It's like an excuse. I'm
That's
only
right.
going to pay
I
half
have
my
a
taxes so I can pay the other half tomorrow and hang out some more.
right. I have a friend in the post office. I love seeing her. Yeah, last time I was in there, she told me she was going to relocate to the mainland, and it was hard to say goodbye. And then next time I walked in, she was still there. She says, my relocation got delayed. I'm like, oh, fantastic.
Do you have a village
We
nearby you?
underestimate. Yeah, I do. I was just going to comment though, we underestimate these kinds of connections. In the US, we really have an epidemic of isolation and loneliness and disconnection. And so we might do exactly what you're saying, which is to gather communities intentionally, to bring people together for the purpose of forging bonds. But these tiny little threads that make you a part of a place, that when I walk in after being absent from Fiji for a while, if I walk into the pharmacy, the pharmacist will say, oh, wow, you're back. Because he noticed that I was gone because I wasn't coming in.
That's probably a good thing.
Yeah. Picking up my vitamins. So these threads that your grandfather describes as well, it gives us this sense of belonging. It gives us this sense of connection that nurtures us, that brings up our spirits. And yeah, that's something that if there's opportunities to cultivate that in the day-to-day in the US, I would always share with people to go for it. Like, go to regular coffee shop, or where, pop into the library and know the librarians, or whatever it is that you like to do, right? To really become a part of the fabric of the community. It'll make you feel better. And there's nothing more important than how you feel. That's how you navigate through life.
We have a quest going to live on every continent, and the way that we measure, like, have we lived there, or are we just visiting for a little while, is if you go into the local restaurant or coffee shop and they're like, do you want the usual? And you're like, yep. Then that's usually like a good sign. Um, or if you can go to the farmer's market and like see the people, or yeah, usually 3 months is about like how long it takes to get to know your sort of neighborhood restaurant or coffee shop. um was I going to say, oh, but in where I live in St. Louis, it's actually the most challenging place I've ever been in to
Really?
find that people that are willing, like even my street, like I have wonderful neighbors when I can interact with them, but I can never get people to like have those serendipitous relationships. It's like, yeah, let's schedule it, and then we can never schedule it. Or it feels like we're surrounded by, I don't know, people who are, yeah, just too busy to interact. It's so weird here. Um, my wife and I have both been surprised about it.
You're really bringing to light an experience that I had when I was back in the US last year. So I was here locked in lockdown during the pandemic. So I was 2 years here at the resort by myself, which was an experience in and of itself. Um, and then last year, when borders opened, I made sure I got back into the US to spend time with friends and family. And I didn't realize, kind of how much my way of being had shifted. A friend of mine who was going through a divorce, um, once I was back in the US, she would call me and she's like, I'm really struggling. Can I come over? I was like, of course, of absolutely. So then she would come over and we'd sit and we'd talk and laugh and cry. And then she would go. And then, maybe a week or so later, she'd say, Monica, can I come over? I'm like, of course. So, again, finally she says to me, Derek, Monica, you're the only person I can call who says, sure, come over. Because everyone else has their calendars. Everyone else says, well, let's see, I could like fit you in for a coffee for an hour next Tuesday. How's that?
Mm-hmm.
And this fact that we keep ourselves so regimented, so structured, that we don't allow for the pervasive beauty of life to even flow through us is such a loss. Like that adage, like people say, like, you're on your deathbed, right? What are you going to remember? Are you going to remember that you were a slave to your calendar and that you were like so locked and loaded with everything that needed to be done? Or are you going to say, I'm so happy I had that glass of wine next to the fire pit serendipitously with a friend who initiated it because she needed help. But once we got together, I realized I needed that time with her too. Like, that's a heart connection. There's no comparison.
Reminds me of when Arda was on the show. He got in this car accident and it was like 6 months and he wasn't sure if he was going to live for the long time, but all of his businesses, all of his projects, like he couldn't do any of it. And he realized, he was like, well, if I died, then I technically don't have any responsibility. That means I don't have any responsibility right now either. So I'm just going to let everything go. And he was like, sweet. I'm I'm good. No responsibilities anymore. And of course
That's a
that led him to,
courageous choice.
yeah, I mean, and it led him to create, amazing new stuff, because he had the space finally to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's,
That's what quantum surfing forth, which I know you wanted to go
yeah,
back to
let's
that.
get into some of the principles of quantum surfing.
Yeah. As I was on this journey of doing these micro experiments, which I still do today, by the way. And then knitting together an understanding of how we can be more effective at bringing our dreams to life. I realized some fundamental principles about our reality that I keep top of mind when I'm now navigating it. Okay? So let's talk about quantum first. We live in a quantum reality. We have no understanding of what that actually is. Our quantum physicists for 100 years told us we live in quantum reality. Quantum algorithms are used to run our computers and send our rockets into space, and many other really pushing the boundaries of technology things. And yet on a day-to-day basis, we're like, okay, like I just live life as I've always lived it. And I started wondering, is there anything in quantum reality that could explain some of these synchronicities, serendipities, spiritual manifestations that I was experiencing? So one principle in quantum is that everything is waves, which is why I call what I do quantum surfing. We have models in life where we paddle through life. We don't surf through life. And paddling is about, I want to go from A to B. And so I work really hard to get from A to B. And if I want to go faster on my little paddleboard, then I work even harder. Okay. Or maybe I just, outfit my paddleboard with a little bit of an outboard engine, but I'm still like pushing myself. I'm not using any of the energy around me. Now, the idea of quantum surfing, given that quantum is all waves, is that rather than only use your own energy, why not tap into the energy around you? Why not realize that you can take your board and catch a wave and surf? And so this shift, mental shift, just from everything is a point and an object to everything is a wave, which is the foundation of the quantum reality, that in itself, for me, says energy is important. How you use your energy, how you apply your energy, how you cultivate your energy. This is like, it's a sport to be able to surf. Okay? So that would be the first principle. Before I go on to another principle in quantum, let me just pause there. Any reflections?
Well, that's a fantastic principle, right? Using energy from around you, I can imagine. Yeah, it's a supercharged, and it's also, it's a fruitful analogy. Thinking of the drag of the water and then the effort it takes to increase your speed. Maybe you could illustrate with an example, like what is it in your experience using energy around you? Like, what does that feel like? And is there an example you can use to showcase that?
Yeah. Well, let's go back to that idea of bouncing from agency to agency here in Fiji. So the adaptation that I took, which is about using my energy to be more aligned with the way things work inside of those agencies, is much more like surfing. It became easy for me to get my tasks done in those agencies. And not only was it easy, it was enjoyable, just like surfing would be. Whereas when I saw the expat couple who were throwing up a ruckus, they were paddling. Like, I just have to push to make anything happen here. Everything is in my way. Everything is an obstacle. This whole place doesn't work the way it should. And so I'm pushing against it. All I did, Derek, was a shift in energy.
You're reminding me of my days on the river when canoeing, and if you want to right, if you want to get down the river faster, like if you need to, maybe you're having a race or you need to get to the campground quicker, right? You can just slide your boat over to the side and be in the current. Or if you want to take a lot of time and because you only you have all day to go like 9 miles or something, then you like go into the part where the water's not moving at all. So it can be like a very subtle like shift of steering in order to like go with the energy or not.
This takes me to the second point I'd love to share about quantum.
Okay,
but
let's do it.
You want me to go?
I feel like
right.
I want another example actually. Like a not a Fiji example, like maybe something maybe from the business world or something like that.
Sure. I was using this principle intuitively many years ago when I was working in Silicon Valley. I was thinking of it as a shift in energy. I was contacted by a woman who was writing a book. She wanted to profile women who were working in Silicon Valley in innovative ways. And so she had a group of women who were running their own businesses. They're essentially consulting to startups, maybe running brand agencies or something like that. And then she had a group of women who were working in corporates, and they had pioneered job sharing. So two of them would hold this, and I say women because at the time it was all about how are you going to raise your children. Now who cares if it's like male or female, but this is how it got started. And so she was interested in these women who were working in corporate. They were in like a high level, perhaps director level position, but there were two of them. And typically they would each work a 4-day week. And so they would overlap with one another and they held a single job.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So she had contacted me because I was working in startups, but I wasn't using either model. So we got into this conversation and she said, Monica, I don't have anyone else who's doing what you're doing. I said, what do you mean? She goes, no one does what you do. And what I was doing is I was doing 1 or 2, sometimes 3 startups at a time. I was a member of the team, sometimes even a founding member of the team. I was typically in the role of chief marketing officer. And in early stage startups, you really benefit from clear positioning, branding, messaging, but it's not a full-time job. And you would be hard pressed to bring in a high caliber, high quality candidate to take a risk in joining a startup full-time. It could be like the death of their high profile marketing career. But for me, just like the other people that were in this book, my priority was my children. And so I wanted to structure my life so that I could be with my children. But I also wanted to work with the most visionary thinkers. I also wanted to work with the leading edge projects. And so I would be a part-time member of each of these teams, contributing in this high-level way. I didn't think it was anything unusual. But I learned from this author that she couldn't find anyone else in the Valley who was working like me. Hopefully, lots of people in the Valley work that way now. I said, in order for me to be able to do the work, she's like, how are you doing it? I said, well, first of all, you have to believe it's possible. Like, it never occurred to me that it wouldn't be possible. She goes, I talked to all these other women, they say that's not possible. I was like, well, it's possible. So first and foremost, you need to believe it's possible. And then secondly, I did two things. One is that you have to be the best in the game. And that's not just like walking in with your credentials. That's like constantly learning. Like when there's a new way to analyze traffic on a website, you understand it. You're coming up to speed, as an example. So you're always honing your craft so that you have value for what you do. But that's like a given. Okay? There's a second part of the equation that I feel was what really allowed me to work in this way. I said, when I walk into an office, I want everyone in that office to feel better than when I arrived. That's it. I want them to feel more energized. I want them to feel happier. I want them to feel lighter. I want them to feel inspired. I want them to feel like things that they thought weren't possible are now possible. That is a shift in energy. And that allowed me to work in this style with great fulfillment for myself and for my clients. And it allowed me to build a business where people would wait, where they would say, when are you available? And, then we put the contract together when I had the bandwidth.
Were you always
That's
this way?
the power of energy. I've always been someone who laughs quite a bit. When I went back for a high school reunion and I was standing in line waiting to check in, there was a classmate of mine I hadn't seen in decades, and he was, several people behind me in line, and I was chatting and giggling and laughing. And he said, "Where is she? I hear her right now." And when I worked at Lucasfilm on Skywalker Ranch, I had this beautiful corner office overlooking the ranch. And throughout the day, I would just have many reasons to start laughing. Sometimes, Derek, those reasons that, as adults, we can laugh at the absurdity of what's happening. Sometimes we laugh because it's silly or funny or charming. Other times I laugh because the chaos is so over the top, which was the case here in Fiji when I first bought the resort. I'm like, what other response can there be but to just go, this is absolutely crazy, and laugh? So it has been a way that I have navigated, just saying, well, we're all in this boat together. Let's make it fun. In fact, as you're asking me this question, I'm realizing that, just over a decade ago, I took my family to Turtle Island for the first time. I hadn't been taking the children there. I waited until they were all tweens, middle schoolers. I have 3 children, because I wanted them to really spend time with my uncle and get to know him. And in that particular trip, it was over the Christmas holidays, and my uncle had a walkout by his top chefs. So full house. He has the cooking staff, but the 2 or 3 top chefs had said, we're out of here. And he said, Monica, do you think you can help? I said, well, I don't know, but let's give it a whirl. And I love to cook. I'm certainly not trained as a top chef, but I went into that kitchen and I sat down with the whole team. I don't know, 8 people on the cooking staff. And I was like, look, this is our situation. This isn't going to change. And we have a full house and we have guests who are expecting to have amazing meals. So I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to turn on the music and we're going to have fun. And when we like coordinate with one another, we're going to dance from one station to the next. Right. And we're going to like hoot and holler and like just giggle and laugh and enjoy ourselves, because our situation is not going to change, but we can change to make the best of our situation. And Derek, we had guests like coming into the kitchen. What's going on in here? It seems like so much fun. Can I come and hang out with you? You know, we had guests saying, oh, wow, you have like an abundance of eggplant. You know, I love roast eggplant and then made into a baba ganoush. Fantastic. You know, put in extra garlic. Excellent. Out it goes. Like the guests themselves became excited about being a part of the culinary experience. And still to this day, the people I worked with in that kitchen are some of my dearest and closest friends. I know them. I know their families. We care about each other. And I can go for long time not seeing them because they don't live in my area of Fiji. But when I see them again, we have that touch point that bonded us.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah. Yeah. You're reminding me of another friend of mine, Colleen Shell. I don't know if you knew her. She spent some time in Silicon Valley. I met her in Bali, but she has like
nice.
all these. Yeah. I mean, you guys would get along great, but she actually came on the show to talk about it because she gets these like amazing VIP opportunities. Like billionaires want to befriend her and they're like, come to my private island or like come to my Burning Man camp or just crazy, you know, backstage passes to life kind of thing, because she makes people feel incredible. And there's some quote like, people won't remember whatever, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And it sounds like you like do that naturally and apply it strategically in some way.
Yes. Yeah, it's important to do it naturally. When I watch people like try to apply it strategically, it has a different energy and it's transparent. Like people know what you're up to. So it's like you have to like authentically hold a certain energy. So what I do in quantum surfing, one, to get people into the groove of surfing rather than paddling through life, is I start by teaching them to be lucky. When I was reflecting on my journey to come to this understanding of how our quantum reality works, I thought, well, I can't take people through my journey. So I decided to get them into the groove by shifting their energy. Now, even the stories I've shared with you, you could go and do those things, but it may not have results that are extraordinary in a short period of time. But teaching yourself to be lucky will deliver extraordinary results very fast. What's actually happening when you train yourself to be lucky is you're shifting your energy and your perspective. But you don't do it by thinking about it. You don't do it by saying, oh, I want to get into this quantum surfing. Let me study it. Or I want to understand Monica's framework. Let me understand the framework. See, this is all thinking energy. Instead, when you train yourself to be lucky, you adopt behaviors that social science has shown result in serendipities. Those behaviors would include curiosity and openness, trusting yourself with intuition, resilience, positive expectations, and I add in playfulness as an accelerator. So in Quantum Surfing 1, we go through each of these behavioral practices, and we just say, just try it out. Try being a little more curious. What are some ways you can be curious? And then people give it a whirl, and they come back in the next session and share what happened. And in 2 weeks of following these practices, I've had more than a couple of people say, I am so lucky, it's almost overwhelming. Can we just turn it off? Like, how do I turn it off now that I've turned it on? This shows like your behaviors can be another way to hack that cycle. What that cycle looks like is your beliefs drive your thoughts, drive your behaviors, drive your feelings, your emotions, and reinforces your beliefs. And so many traditions say, let me explain to you how this works. Like, let's get into the mind. Let's get the mind out of the way. It like starts at the top of that cycle, if you will, with the beliefs and then the thinking. And I find it's much faster just to start with behaviors that produce different results that are delightful.
How is that different than fake it till you make it?
For me, and I'd love to hear what you feel about fake it till you make it. Faking it is exactly that. It has an energy of falsehood. It's like fake it till you make it. It means that you still have all your goal orientation. You're just trying a different route. Whereas what I'm suggesting is to experiment with these ideas independent of any expectations of outcome. Like, you're not doing them to achieve something in a different way.
Yeah. So it's like, you're not trying to do a behavior of a person, you're experimenting with the behavior to see what happens. And I think, yeah, I love that perspective. And I feel like there's actually, you could have an entry point anywhere in the cycle. It seems, a lot of times I will start with an identity and like drop a new identity, which sort of like leads to beliefs and in the cycle that way. But you could also potentially start with the emotion that could like create the belief. But you're saying the most fun way that you found is through the experimenting with the experiences. Is that right?
As on me that way, that in that place. Can you back up a little bit?
I think I was confusing experience and experiment. But what you're saying is you will just run like a experimental behavior and see what the result is, and also see how it made you feel. Like, you're kind of like testing a couple different things.
That's right. And I think these small experiments are really powerful. You have no expectations. You're just experimenting. So you might, try a little behavior and then see if anything happens. Observe, see if anything different happens. And then start to say, oh my gosh, so like that little lucky occurrence, that's weird. It doesn't even seem connected to this behavior. And then to say, oh, another one of those is happening. What? I wouldn't imagine that these are connected at all. And then you start to say, well, how was I feeling before that happened? A small example. And if you play with this at all, you'll start to see these kinds of energetic connections. Sometimes the things that you wish for with the least amount of attachment are the things that flow in almost immediately. Like you're taking a long drive and you're like, I'd really love an ice cream right now. And then just a little ways down the road, it's like, you want some ice cream? It's like this like huge banner, with like someone's ice cream reaching out to you. So often we don't even notice these things because they're small. We're trained not to notice. We're so engaged in whatever it is we're focusing on. But when you're in an experimental mode, you're challenging yourself to notice. Now, this is also breaking through neuroscience, right? Because the way that the brain works is it conserves energy. So you don't actually see everything in your environment because your brain has said over time, those things aren't important. They're not relevant to the agenda. And so when you launch these experiments, you're actually going, hey, okay, got it, brain. Thanks for being on track here. Let's just try to notice something as well. So you're kind of like interrupting that streamlining that the brain uses to conserve energy and to be able to process faster.
Are you running any experiments right now?
I am. I have been feeling that I personally have some habits and patterns that I have outgrown, but I haven't put new patterns in place. This is very typical. If we think of the hero's journey in the next chapter of the book, we move from one chapter to another. Lots of times as a chapter is ending, we hold on to it. There's something we love about it. It's familiar, right? But it's also, you're like, gosh, who edited this book? Can you just like wrap it up? I got it. Let's get on to the next thing. In that space of transition, it can feel like stuckness. I've had several coming to me recently for coaching to say, I don't know what's going on, Monica, but like I'm highly accomplished, highly capable, have always been on a track of success. And yet I'm like stuck. And no matter what I'm doing, it seems like it's not moving the needle. And in some ways, I've found that to be true for myself in the last 2 months as well. I'm like, what's the situation here? Well, the way that I've decided to experiment opening this up is to run an energy experiment, which is 100 days of happiness. So on May 1st, I'm embarking on 100 days of happiness, of deliberately choosing to frame my day in the context of happiness, joy, excitement, enthusiasm, appreciation, gratitude, right? Deliberately focused on happiness. So I'm doing this for myself. I've already started in many ways. And then Derek, I was like, I'm doing this for myself. And so many people have been commenting to me that they're also trying to navigate from one chapter to another. And they're kind of like in that little bit of frictional stuckness in between. I'm like, why don't I just invite other people to do it with me? So this morning I posted on Instagram, okay, who's in for 100 days of happiness? We're starting on May 1st, 5 days from now. And look, it's just, it's easy. There's a financial commitment of a whopping $100, $1 a day. then because once we invest in something, then we're committed. It's a way of like saying, I'm on board. I'm a part of this. I'm in for this experiment. I'm in for this experiment to see how my life might open with more opportunities and possibility and sparkles than what I'm experiencing right now. So there you go. Yes, I'm launching a 100-day of happiness experiment.
Cool. Is there any more instruction than that, or is it just each day you will vow to be happy and see what happens?
Yeah. Um, I personally find that the morning is a very important time. It's a way of setting the tone for the day. So what I'll have is a journal page. I use a lucky journal page when I teach Quantum Surfing 1, so that you're in the habit of recording your lucky experiences. In fact, that journal page is available in a free download on the quantumsurfing.com site. And it's right there on the homepage called Be Lucky. So for this experiment in happiness, I will modify that journal page so that every day you will reflect on a new prompt around happiness. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that it starts to shift your awareness. Mm-hmm. And then the experience will be online. It'll consist of a Facebook group and a messenger thread. And that as part of the commitment for being in the 100 days of happiness, you share. Here's my happiness experience of the environment around you.
Hey, Monica. I lost you for
Did we
another
freeze?
chunk. Yeah, I lost you for a chunk there.
In the 100 days of happiness, it's an online experience where you have a journal for happiness and you have a prompt every day, so that you have a chance to reflect on where you're shifting your perspective in order to appreciate what's already around you, in order to notice what's already there that had been escaping your notice previously. And that each day you make it a habit. It only takes like 21 days to make a new habit. So 100 days like should really lock it in. So it's like a 5x. But there's be an online group so that you have a chance to check in every day and say, oh, here's what I've been observing. Here's what I'm experiencing now that I'm adopting a different energy. Because these shifts are important. The reality around us is revealed by the energy that we hold. Like that quote is, you don't see reality for what it is. You see it through the lens of who you are. And so just when you start to shift your energy, then you see your environment and your surroundings and your connections and your opportunities and your possibilities and potential in a completely different way. So that's the experiment I'm launching. I felt to launch it for myself. And then I thought, well, I love a road trip, obviously, with lots of fun people. And so I wonder if other people might enjoy doing this particular road trip together. So that's my experiment. I do share quantum surfing with so many people, but it tends to be a more in-depth endeavor. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking for something that more lightweight and that would be available too for the people who have already gone through quantum surfing, because what they tell me is, hey, how do I stay in this energy? Mm-hmm. Right. And so that's why I thought to start to launch these like group experiments.
Yeah. And I just realized kind of for the first time, like journal prompts are such a fantastic way of directing your attention. Because because they force you to look in a certain direction, which I'm sure everybody else knew, but I just realized it.
There's a form of journaling that I've really come to love, and that so many people who've gone through the quantum surfing curriculum use to great advantage, and it would be called automatic writing. So on your page, you write down your question, or perhaps you start with a prompt. And rather than think about the response, you allow a response to flow through you. And you don't even pay attention to what is being said. You simply scribe what is coming through. That consistently reveals really powerful insights. It's a way of connecting to your intuition, which connects you to consciousness, that connects is to the greater picture. So when I did journaling decades ago, oh, this is bothering me. It was almost like just recording in a diary, an accounting of my experience of reality. I don't do it that way anymore. I do it in this way that I write down a question, and that's why the prompts are helpful, because people may not be accustomed to doing this. So it's just a way to get you started. But when I sit down with my journal, whatever question comes into mind, I just write it down. And then I wait. And when I feel that there's a response, then I just start writing it. It unlocks answers to many conundrums that we might be dealing with without thinking our way to that. So as long as you're enjoying journaling, that's an approach I would recommend, that I would share, because it's been delightful for myself and so many other people.
Yeah, I'm actually, it's funny, I just tried, maybe it was because I was preparing for this interview, but I tried automatic writing for the first time yesterday. It's a little different than free writing, which is what I've used for creative insight in the past, which is like speed. You have a same kind of thing where you have a question, but you have to type or write so fast that your filter drops away because it can't keep up. So usually it happens like a few minutes in, where you've said all the things that are like in your conscious awareness, and then it shifts to the subconscious. And you can even tell like the handwriting will change, halfway down the page, or the typing. And the thing is, like, you get to that point where you feel your brain run out of thoughts. And a lot of times it's where I'll type like, and then something starts flowing in its place. So it sounds similar, but I took that from sort of the days of improv, where when I was doing improv acting, you're like, you force yourself into acting before you can like think of a scene or a character or something like that. Like you just act and let it flow through you. And it's almost kind of like taking a leap of faith, where you're like, I hope this is gonna work, and then it does. But you have to practice it.
Yeah, I love this free writing. I hadn't tried actually doing it so fast like that, but it does remind me of where I started. Like the kind of this original seed of this practice was when I adopted morning pages, which is recommended by Julia Cameron. And what she says is, look, every morning you're going to write 3 pages in that journal. And you might start exactly as you're saying, by saying, literally writing down, I have nothing to say. Today is a shit day. Nothing is going well. And I'm so frustrated by blah, 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 blah. And then you've kind of cleared that out of the way, and then you keep going. When I would do morning pages, I would find that certainly by page 3, there would be a few nuggets that were true insights and highly valuable. What I find when I'm doing automatic writing, to your point on how the language shifts, like a little bit further down the page, and I think you said maybe the style of writing might even shift. Mm-hmm. I know when that shift has happened when I start writing in the third person, like I'm talking to myself. So it will shift from I am wondering about such and such and such and such. And then in the automatic writing, it will shift to Monica, and then would be addressing me by name.
Oh, interesting.
And there's a distinct difference when now you're in conversation with a unified consciousness, with you're in that fabric and connected. It's so beautiful. It's so wonderful, Derek. It's like all of a sudden you have a team that cares about you. You're all in the team together. You know, you're like, and the way that it comes in for me is this so much respect for who I am, so valuing me, so much love, and holding that and elevating me at the same time. You know, as I share that with you, it's exactly what I do with my clients. When they're navigating transitions, which is where I specialize, when they're ready to give birth to that next chapter, I hold for them the fact that they're absolutely on the right track, that they have everything that they need, that they are, that I hold the beauty of who they are. In order to like almost allow that to give them the freedom, the confidence, the trust to move into unknown waters.
Which is a theme for this episode, really, of you making people feel amazing and seen and appreciated and understood. So that's definitely a superpower. I mean, I wanted to do this interview because I just love hanging out with you too. So
I'm so delighted that we got connected, which is, you know, really such a joy of our globally connected internet now. You know, we got connected in just another networking group online. Mm-hmm. And then discovered that, you know, we had a mutual connection and started spending more time together. And I look forward to the time that we get to meet in person. And I look forward to all the fun that we're going to have when that happens.
Let's do it. Monica, where can people learn more about you and find you online?
I'm on quantumsurfing.com and also quantum surfing on all social channels. Like Instagram is where I often post from time to time. I post on Facebook as well. And then on LinkedIn, I'm Monica Laurence. So lots of different ways to find me. I would suggest going to quantumsurfing.com and starting with the Be Lucky ebook. And if you feel to do an experiment together and launch into 100 Days of Happiness, that's what I'm doing right now.
Wonderful. Well, good to see you as always. Thanks for coming on today.
Good to see you, Derek. Thank you so much for having me. Such a joy to spend this time together. Thank you.
My pleasure. All right, we'll talk soon.
Perfect. Talk to you later.
Bye.